The morning sun filtered through the dusty blinds of the courtroom as Nora Walker clutched her worn leather purse tightly on her lap. The wooden bench beneath her felt hard and unforgiving, much like the stare her ex-husband James was giving her from across the room. Next to Nora sat her mother, Patricia, who occasionally squeezed her daughter's hand in silent support. Between them, 6-year-old Lily colored quietly in her sketchbook, seemingly oblivious to the tension that filled the air. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Wilson," announced the bailiff. Nora stood on shaky legs. She hadn't slept properly in weeks, not since James had filed for full custody of Lily. The dark circles under her eyes probably didn't help her case, she thought bitterly. She smoothed down her simple navy blue dress, the nicest one she owned, and tried to look composed. "You may be seated," said Judge Wilson, a stern-faced woman with salt and pepper hair pulled back in a tight bun. "We're here today to continue the custody hearing for Lily Walker. Mr. Baker, you may call your next witness." James's attorney, a slick man in an expensive suit that Nora could never afford, stood up with a confident smile. "The defense calls Dr. Raymond Phillips to the stand." Nora's heart sank. Dr. Phillips was a psychiatrist who had met with her exactly once at James's insistence during their marriage. She remembered that day clearly. She had been exhausted after finding her car keys in the freezer, something she was certain she hadn't done. When she had mentioned this to Dr. Phillips along with other strange occurrences, he had exchanged a look with James that made her stomach turn. As Dr. Phillips was sworn in, Nora leaned toward her attorney, a public defender named David Chen. "This isn't good," she whispered. "Just stay calm," David whispered back, but the worry in his eyes betrayed him. "Dr. Phillips," began James's attorney, "could you please describe your professional assessment of Mrs. Walker based on your session with her?" The psychiatrist adjusted his glasses and spoke with practiced authority. "Mrs. Walker displayed several concerning behaviors consistent with paranoid ideation. She reported instances of misplacing items and blamed others for moving them. She expressed beliefs that her husband was manipulating her environment to confuse her. And in your professional opinion, what might these symptoms indicate?" "They could be consistent with several conditions, including paranoid personality disorder or potentially early signs of delusional disorder." Nora felt the blood drain from her face. She hadn't known about this diagnosis. David scribbled frantically on his legal pad. "And would someone suffering from these conditions be a suitable primary caregiver for a young child?" continued James's attorney. "Objection." David stood up. "Dr. Phillips met with my client only once, 3 years ago. This is hardly sufficient for a clinical diagnosis." "Your Honor," countered James's attorney, "Dr. Phillips is merely stating his professional observations, not providing a formal diagnosis." Judge Wilson nodded. "Overruled. The witness may answer." Dr. Phillips cleared his throat. "Individuals with paranoid tendencies often create unstable environments. They may project their fears onto their children or involve them in their paranoid beliefs. This can be harmful to a child's development." Nora felt like she might be sick. From the corner of her eye, she could see James looking satisfied. His arms crossed over his chest. How had it come to this? Just 3 years ago, they had been a family. Now here he was, trying to paint her as a crazy woman in order to take Lily away. After Dr. Phillips stepped down, James himself took the stand. He was dressed in a crisp blue shirt that brought out his eyes, his dark hair neatly combed. Nora remembered how she'd once found that smile charming. Now it just seemed cold. "Mr. Walker," his attorney began, "can you describe your ex-wife's behavior during your marriage?" James put on a sad, concerned expression. "It started small. Nora would accuse me of moving her things or changing plans we'd made. At first I thought she was just forgetful, stressed from being a new mom." He paused dramatically. "But it got worse. She installed hidden cameras in our house because she thought I was sneaking around at night. She started keeping a journal of evidence against me, claiming I was gaslighting her." "And were you?" asked the attorney. "Of course not," James said, his voice full of practiced sincerity. "I loved my wife. I tried to get her help, but she refused to continue treatment. After that one visit with Dr. Phillips, she started telling Lily that I couldn't be trusted. That's when I knew I had to act for my daughter's safety. Nora dug her nails into her palms to keep from shouting out. Everything he said was twisted. Yes, she had installed a single camera after finding her houseplants moved repeatedly. Yes, she had kept a journal, but only because she was beginning to doubt her own sanity when things kept changing around the house. Your Honor, James continued, looking directly at the judge, I don't want to keep Lily from her mother. I just want primary custody to ensure Lily has a stable environment. Nora's paranoia is getting worse, not better. As James stepped down, Nora noticed several people in the courtroom glancing at her with pity or suspicion. Even the court reporter seemed to be avoiding eye contact. The defense calls Mrs. Rachel Thompson, announced James's attorney. A well-dressed woman Nora recognized as Lily's kindergarten teacher approached the stand. Nora felt a flicker of hope. Surely Mrs. Thompson would speak about what a good mother she was. But as the questioning began, Nora's hope faded. Mrs. Thompson, has Mrs. Walker ever behaved unusually during parent-teacher meetings? Mrs. Thompson looked uncomfortable. Well, there was one incident. Mrs. Walker asked if I could check if anyone unusual had been picking Lily up from school. When I said only she and Mr. Walker had, according to our records, she insisted someone else had picked Lily up on a Tuesday. She seemed very agitated about it. Was there any truth to this claim? No, our sign-out logs were clear. Mr. Walker had picked Lily up that day, as scheduled in their parenting plan. What Mrs. Thompson didn't know, what Nora couldn't prove, was that James had convinced the after-school coordinator to adjust the log after the fact. Nora had seen James's car that day driving away from the school at a time when he should have been at work. As the testimonies continued, Nora felt increasingly helpless. James had systematically turned everyone against her, friends, teachers. Even the family doctor had a statement about Nora's concerning behavior when she'd asked too many questions about whether Lily's medications had been tampered with. Beside her, Lily had stopped coloring and was watching the proceedings with far more understanding than a 6-year-old should have. She tugged on Nora's sleeve. "Mommy," she whispered. "Why is Daddy saying these things?" "It's complicated, sweetheart," Nora whispered back, trying to shield her daughter from the ugliness of it all. By the time the court recessed for lunch, Nora could see from David's expression that things weren't going well. Her case would be presented tomorrow, but what evidence did she have? Her word against James's carefully constructed narrative, backed by expert testimonies and character witnesses. As they gathered their things, Nora caught James watching her with that same smug smile he'd worn the night he'd told her, "No one will ever believe you." In that moment, she feared he might be right. What Nora didn't notice was the determined look on little Lily's face as she carefully tucked her tablet deep into her backpack, or the whispered conversation between Lily and Grandma Patricia as they headed to the courthouse cafeteria. Tomorrow would bring unexpected revelations that not even James could have prepared for. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Nora's small apartment as she sat at her kitchen table, a cup of tea growing cold between her trembling hands. The first day of the custody hearing had been worse than she'd imagined. Her mother, Patricia, was tucking Lily into bed in the next room, reading her favorite story about a brave little rabbit who outsmarted a fox. "She's asleep," Patricia said softly, entering the kitchen and taking a seat across from her daughter. The older woman's face showed the same exhaustion that Nora felt deep in her bones. "I don't know what to do, Mom," Nora whispered, afraid that Lily might hear. "James has everyone believing I'm losing my mind. Even David looks like he doesn't believe me anymore." Patricia reached across the table and squeezed her daughter's hand. "I believe you. I've watched that man twist things for years." Nora closed her eyes, memories washing over her like a cold wave. It had started so gradually that she hadn't noticed at first. She'd misplaced something, her car keys, her phone, her favorite sweater, only to find them in places she was certain she hadn't left them. When she mentioned it to James, he'd look concerned and suggest she was working too hard. He'd offer to take over more household responsibilities, to help her. "Remember the dinner party?" Nora asked her mother. Patricia nodded grimly. "How could I forget?" It had been their 5th anniversary. Nora had invited friends and family over for dinner at 7 p.m. She'd sent out invitations, confirmed with everyone. But when the doorbell rang at 6 she'd opened it to find her best friend Tanya, standing there in a nice dress. "We're an hour early, I know," Tanya had said apologetically. "But Tom has that work thing later, so you said it would be fine." Nora hadn't said that. She knew she hadn't. But before she could explain, James had appeared behind her, all smiles and charm. "Honey, did you forget we changed the time? You've been so scattered lately, remember? We talked about it last weekend." His voice had been gentle, concerned, but his eyes had held something else, something cold and satisfied when Nora looked confused. By the time all 12 guests had arrived, all an hour early, Nora had been flustered. Dinner wasn't ready, and James had smoothly taken over, ordering takeout and telling everyone with a sad smile that Nora's been having trouble keeping track of things lately. After that night, their friends started looking at her differently, with concern, with doubt. "He planned it all," Nora said now, her voice bitter. "He called everyone but me and changed the time, then made me look crazy." Patricia sighed. "The problem is proving it. He's so careful to never leave evidence." Nora choked back a sob. "The worst part is what he's been doing to Lily. Telling her I said things I never said, making plans with her, then telling her I canceled them and watching her get upset with me." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Last month he told her I promised to take her to the amusement park, but that I changed my mind. Mom, I never even knew about it until she was crying and asking me why I didn't want to go anymore." Patricia's face hardened. That poor child. Using her like a pawn. And now he wants full custody. He's going to take her away from me, and the court is going to let him do it. Nora's voice broke. "They all think I'm paranoid." "Well, you're not paranoid if someone's really out to get you," Patricia replied firmly. A small sound from the hallway made both women turn. Lily stood there in her yellow pajamas, clutching her stuffed elephant. "Sweetie, you should be asleep," Nora said, quickly wiping her eyes and forcing a smile. Lily padded into the kitchen and climbed onto her mother's lap. "I don't want to live with Daddy," she said, her little voice clear and determined. "Oh, honey." Nora stroked her daughter's hair. "Sometimes grown-ups have to do what the judge says, even if we don't want to." Lily looked up at her mother with serious eyes. "Daddy does bad things." Nora and Patricia exchanged a glance. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Nora asked carefully. Lily fidgeted with her elephant's ear. "He tells me to say things that aren't true. He says if I don't, you'll get sicker in your head and have to go to a hospital." Nora felt her blood run cold. "What kinds of things does he tell you to say?" "He says I should tell the lady who talks to me at his house that you forget to make me dinner sometimes and that you cry a lot and scare me." Lily's bottom lip trembled. "But it's not true. You always make dinner. And when you cry, you go in your room so I don't see." Nora realized Lily was talking about the court-appointed evaluator who had interviewed her at James's house last month. The report had mentioned concerns about Nora's ability to provide consistent care and emotional stability, concerns that now made terrible sense. "Has Daddy done other things that aren't true?" Patricia asked gently. Lily nodded. "He takes pictures of my room here when it's messy, but he makes it messy first when you're in the bathroom. And he told me not to tell you about the medicine." Nora's heart began to pound. "What medicine, Lily?" "The medicine he puts in your tea when you're not looking. When I stay at Daddy's and you come to pick me up. He says it's vitamins to help you, but he says it's a secret between us." Patricia gasped softly. Nora felt dizzy. The times she'd felt strangely tired after stopping by James's house to pick up Lily. The days she couldn't seem to focus after, having a quick cup of tea with him for Lily's sake to show they could be civil. Had he been drugging her? "Lily, this is very important," Nora said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Did you ever see what this medicine looked like?" Lily nodded. Little white pills he crushes up. He keeps them in his bathroom in a bottle with a funny name. Nora and Patricia exchanged another look, this one filled with horror and dawning understanding. Why didn't you tell me before, sweetie? Nora asked. Lily's eyes filled with tears. Daddy said if I told they'd take me away from both of you. And he said you wouldn't believe me because your brain is sick. She sniffled. But I heard what the people said in court today. They're lying about you. Nora pulled her daughter close, her mind racing. If James had been drugging her, it would explain the periods of confusion and forgetfulness that he'd so carefully documented and shared with their friends, family, and now the court. But how could she prove it? Grandma, Lily said suddenly, turning to Patricia, can I show you something on my tablet? Patricia looked surprised. Your tablet? Yes, of course. Lily slid off Nora's lap and ran to her backpack by the front door. She returned with her pink tablet, the one James had gotten her for Christmas. Daddy doesn't know I know how to use the camera part, Lily explained, as her small fingers navigated to the gallery. He thinks I just play games. She handed the tablet to her grandmother. On the screen was a video. Patricia pressed play and James's face filled the screen. He was talking to someone off camera, laughing. Don't worry, by next week I'll have full custody. His voice came through clearly. The medication I've been giving her makes her just disoriented enough that everyone thinks she's unstable. Best part is, it leaves her system in hours, so even if she got tested, they'd find nothing. Nora's hand flew to her mouth. Patricia looked up from the tablet, her eyes wide. Lily, when did you take this? Patricia asked. Last weekend at Daddy's house. He was talking to his friend, the one with the shiny shoes. I hid under the desk in his office. Lily looked at her mother. I have more videos. Lots more. For the first time in months, Nora felt a flicker of hope. She pulled her daughter close and whispered, You are the bravest, smartest little girl in the world. Tomorrow would be her day to present her case. And thanks to Lily, she might finally have the evidence she needed. The night before the second day of the custody hearing was a busy one in Nora's small apartment. After Lily had gone back to sleep, Nora and Patricia sat at the kitchen table with David, Nora's attorney, watching video after video on Lily's pink tablet. This is incredible, David said, his tired eyes now wide awake. How did she manage to record all this? She's always been smart, Nora said, a mix of pride and sadness in her voice. Too smart, maybe. She understood what was happening, even when I tried to shield her from it. On the tablet screen, James could be seen carefully moving items around Nora's house during a custody exchange, taking pictures, then putting everything back. In another video, he was on the phone, laughing about how easy it was to make Nora look unstable. The judge needs to see this, David said, running a hand through his hair. But we need to be careful. If we spring this on the court without proper procedure, it could backfire. We don't have time for proper procedure, Patricia argued. The hearing continues tomorrow. James is asking for emergency custody. David nodded, thinking. I'll file an emergency motion first thing in the morning to allow new evidence. Judge Wilson arrives at 7:30. I'll be waiting at her chambers. He looked at Nora seriously. But we need to talk about the medication claims. That's the most serious accusation here, and we need more than Lily's word. Nora touched her teacup, remembering how many times she'd accepted a drink at James's house during exchanges. He always made tea when I picked up Lily, said it was for her sake that we show we could be civil. Do you still have any of those cups or bottles he might have given you? David asked. Nora shook her head, then stopped. Wait, the travel mug. About 2 weeks ago, he gave me tea in my own travel mug to take with me, said it was a peace offering. I felt so strange after drinking it that I put it aside, meaning to wash it, but I forgot. It might still be in my car. David stood up immediately. Let's check. 10 minutes later, they were looking at the stained inside of a blue travel mug that had been sitting in Nora's car for 2 weeks. It's probably useless now, Nora said, disappointed. Maybe not, David replied. I have a friend who works at the hospital lab. I'll take it to her tonight, see if she can rush a test. No promises, but it's worth a try. As David left with the travel mug carefully bagged, Patricia turned to her daughter. "You should get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." Nora nodded, but sleep seemed impossible. "I'm going to watch the videos again. If I'm going to testify, I need to know exactly what we have." After reviewing the videos several more times, Nora finally dozed off on the couch around 3 a.m., only to be awakened by her phone buzzing at 6:30. It was David. "They found traces of a sedative in the mug," he said without preamble. "It's a prescription, sleep aid, but in small doses during the day it would make you foggy, forgetful, disoriented. Exactly what James has been claiming are symptoms of your condition." Nora sat up straight, fully awake now. "So we have proof?" "It's not perfect. The concentrations are low after 2 weeks and we can't prove who put it there. But combined with Lily's videos, it's compelling. The judge has agreed to review the new evidence this morning." 2 hours later, Nora sat in the courtroom beside David, her mother and Lily just behind them. Across the aisle, James looked confident, occasionally turning to smile reassuringly at his friends and family who had come to support him. He clearly expected today to go his way. Judge Wilson entered and everyone rose. After they were seated, she cleared her throat. "Before we continue with Mrs. Walker's testimony, I understand there is a motion to present new evidence. Mr. Chen?" David stood. "Yes, Your Honor. We have discovered evidence that is directly relevant to these proceedings, including video recordings and forensic testing that contradict key testimony presented yesterday." James's attorney jumped to his feet. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. We have not been provided with any of this supposed evidence. That's because it was only discovered last night," David replied calmly. "And given the emergency nature of Mr. Walker's custody request, we believe the court should review this immediately." Judge Wilson considered for a moment. "I'll allow it, but I want both attorneys in my chambers to review it first. Court will recess for 30 minutes. As the attorneys followed the judge, Nora caught James looking at her with suspicion. For the first time, he seemed unsure. 30 minutes stretched to an hour. Lily, still not fully understanding the seriousness of the situation, had gone back to her coloring book. Patricia kept glancing at the chamber doors. "What's taking so long?" Nora whispered. "That's a good sign," Patricia assured her. "It means the judge is really looking at everything." Finally, the doors opened. Judge Wilson looked stern as she retook her seat. The attorneys followed, David looking cautiously optimistic, James's lawyer tight-lipped and tense. "Court is back in session," Judge Wilson announced. "Based on the evidence I've reviewed, I find sufficient cause to continue these proceedings with the new information. Mr. Walker, this court takes very seriously the allegations that have emerged." James shifted in his seat, his confident smile replaced by a look of confusion. "Mr. Chen, you may present your evidence to the court." David stood. "Your Honor, we have several videos recorded by Lily Walker that show Mr. Walker engaging in behavior directly aimed at undermining Mrs. Walker's credibility and mental stability. Additionally, we have forensic evidence suggesting Mr. Walker may have been administering medication to Mrs. Walker without her knowledge." A murmur went through the courtroom. James leaned over to his attorney, speaking urgently. "Before we proceed," David continued, "we would like to request that Lily Walker be permitted to address the court." James's attorney stood quickly. "Your Honor, this is highly inappropriate. The child is 6 years old. She's clearly been coached." Judge Wilson looked at Lily, who was watching the proceedings with solemn eyes. "Given the nature of the evidence already presented to me in chambers, I'm inclined to hear from the child." She turned to Patricia. "Mrs. Davis, please bring your granddaughter forward." Patricia took Lily's hand and led her to stand before the judge's bench. Lily looked tiny in the large courtroom, but her posture was straight, her chin up. "Hello, Lily," Judge Wilson said, her tone gentler than it had been all morning. "Do you know why you're here today?" Lily nodded. "My daddy and mommy both want me to live with them, but daddy has been telling lies about mommy." "And how do you know they're lies?" "Because I saw him doing things. Bad things. And I took videos. Because nobody would believe me either. I'm little, but I'm not stupid. There was a small ripple of surprised laughter in the courtroom, quickly silenced by the judge's stern look. "Your Honor," David said, standing. "With the court's permission, Lily would like to show one of the videos she recorded." Judge Wilson nodded. "Proceed." Patricia helped Lily connect her tablet to the courtroom's display system. The screen at the front of the courtroom flickered to life, showing the interior of what was clearly James's living room. And there was James, looking directly into the camera, unaware he was being recorded as he spoke to someone off-screen about his plan to win custody by making Nora appear unstable. The courtroom fell completely silent as James's own voice filled the room. "Trust me, by next week she won't have a leg to stand on. Everyone already thinks she's losing it. A few more episodes and I'll have full custody by Friday." Nora glanced over at James, who had gone completely pale. His attorney was frantically writing notes, and on her small pink tablet, little Lily pressed play on the second video. The second video started playing on the large courtroom display. This time, the camera angle was lower, clearly hidden somewhere in James's kitchen. James and a well-dressed man Nora recognized as his friend Pete were sitting at the kitchen island drinking beer. "You should have seen her face when the teacher mentioned those missed appointments," James was saying, laughing. "Appointments I made up." She looked so confused. Pete looked uncomfortable. "Man, don't you think this is going a bit far? I mean, she's the mother of your kid." James waved his hand dismissively. "She's unstable. Everyone can see it now. Besides, once I get full custody, I'll let her see Lily. Supervised, of course." He smirked. "And I'll get the house, too. Judge won't let a crazy person keep a kid or a mortgage." The video ended, and before anyone could react, a third one began. This time, James was in what appeared to be his bathroom, carefully crushing small white pills into powder with the back of a spoon. The camera was positioned behind a stack of towels, recording him as he tipped the powder into a teacup, stirred it thoroughly, then practiced a concerned smile in the mirror. "For your own good, Nora," he said to his reflection. "Can't have you thinking clearly in court, can we?" Gasps echoed throughout the courtroom. Judge Wilson's face had turned to stone. James was on his feet, pointing at the screen. That's been tampered with. She edited that," he shouted. "Your Honor," his attorney tried to interject. "These videos have not been authenticated. They could easily have been." "The tablet has been examined by the court's technical expert," Judge Wilson cut him off. "The videos appear to be continuous and unedited. Lily, how did you know to record these things?" Lily looked up at the judge, her small face serious. "Daddy thought I didn't know how to use the camera. He only showed me games. But Grandma taught me how to take pictures and videos at Christmas." She glanced at her father, then quickly away. "I knew Daddy was doing bad things to Mommy. He would wait until he thought I was asleep, then he would talk on the phone about his plans." "And you recorded these videos without your father knowing?" the judge asked. Lily nodded. "I would hide my tablet and leave it recording, sometimes under the couch, sometimes in my backpack. Daddy doesn't check my stuff when I go between houses." James's face had turned from pale to red. "She's lying. My own daughter. Nora put her up to this." Judge Wilson slammed her gavel down. "Mr. Walker, control yourself or I'll have you removed." She turned to Lily again. "Did your mother know you were recording these videos?" Lily shook her head. "No, I was scared to tell anybody. Daddy said no one would believe me because I'm just a kid." Her lower lip trembled slightly. "I only showed Mommy last night because I heard what people said in court yesterday. They were being mean to her because of Daddy's lies." David stepped forward. "Your Honor, there are 17 videos in total, recorded over the past 2 months. We've provided copies to the court and to opposing counsel. Additionally, we have the lab report on the travel mug that tested positive for temazepam, a controlled substance for which Mr. Walker has a prescription. According to pharmacy records we've subpoenaed." The courtroom had grown utterly silent. Nora could feel tears streaming down her face, tears of relief, of vindication, of heartbreak that her 6-year-old daughter had felt the need to become a secret detective. Judge Wilson was writing notes, her expression grave. When she looked up, her eyes went directly to James. "Mr. Walker, These allegations are extremely serious. Tampering with evidence, perjury, administering a controlled substance without consent. These are criminal matters. James's attorney stood. Your Honor, we request a continuance to examine this new evidence and prepare a response. Denied, Judge Wilson said flatly. Based on what I've seen, there is an immediate safety concern. She turned to the bailiff. Please contact the district attorney's office. I want a representative here within the hour. The bailiff nodded and left the courtroom. Your Honor, James protested, his voice rising. This is a setup. She's been planning this. Mr. Walker, the judge interrupted, her voice ice cold. I strongly advise you to remain silent until you've consulted with criminal defense counsel, which you will likely need. She turned to Nora. Mrs. Walker, I'm prepared to issue a temporary order granting you sole custody pending further proceedings. Additionally, I'm issuing a temporary restraining order against Mr. Walker, prohibiting him from contacting you or your daughter outside of court-approved channels. Nora could hardly believe what she was hearing. After months of being disbelieved, of watching James systematically destroy her credibility, of fearing she would lose her daughter, finally, someone in authority could see the truth. Thank you, Your Honor, she managed to say, her voice thick with emotion. Lily had returned to Patricia's side, and the older woman pulled her granddaughter close, whispering something in her ear that made the little girl smile for the first time that day. James sat rigidly beside his attorney, his face a mask of fury as they whispered urgently. The confident man who had strutted into court expecting to win full custody was gone, replaced by someone who suddenly realized he might be facing criminal charges. Court recessed while they waited for the district attorney's representative to arrive. Nora, Patricia, and Lily were escorted to a small conference room, where David explained what would happen next. The DA will want to interview Lily about the videos, he said gently. They'll be very careful with her. There are special protocols for interviewing children. Nora looked at her daughter with a mixture of pride and concern. You did something very brave, sweetheart. But I wish you hadn't had to. Lily shrugged in that matter-of-fact way that only children can manage. I just did what you always tell me to do when something's wrong. I told the truth. Nora pulled her daughter into a tight hug, feeling the small, warm body against hers, realizing how close she had come to losing her. Is Daddy going to jail? Lily asked, her voice muffled against Nora's shoulder. Nora and David exchanged a look over the child's head. I don't know, sweetheart, Nora answered honestly. What he did was very wrong, but whatever happens, it's not your fault. You did the right thing. Lily pulled back, looking at her mother seriously. I know. Grandma says sometimes grown-ups do bad things and have to face consequences, Patricia supplied, stroking her granddaughter's hair. Yeah, that. Like when I broke Mrs. Hendricks's flower pot and had to use my allowance to buy a new one. Despite everything, Nora found herself smiling at her daughter's simple but accurate comparison. There was a knock at the door, and a woman in a sharp gray suit entered, introducing herself as Kelly Torres from the district attorney's office. She had kind eyes and spoke directly to Lily rather than over her head. You must be Lily. I heard you're quite the filmmaker, she said, kneeling down to be at eye level with the child. Lily nodded solemnly. I'm not in trouble, am I? Ms. Torres shook her head. Not at all. In fact, you've been incredibly brave and helpful. I just need to ask you some questions about your videos, if that's okay. As Lily nodded, Nora watched the interaction with a surge of gratitude for her smart, brave daughter, for her steadfast mother, for David's tireless advocacy, even for Ms. Torres's gentle approach. After months of isolation and doubt, she was no longer fighting alone. Outside in the hallway, she could hear raised voices. James, still protesting his innocence, still trying to control the narrative. But for the first time in years, his voice no longer had the power to make her doubt herself. 6 months had passed since that fateful day in court. The maple trees outside Nora's window were turning brilliant shades of orange and red as autumn settled over the neighborhood. She sat on her porch swing, A cup of tea, one she had made, herself, warming her hands against the cool October air. So much had changed. The house she now lived in was smaller than the one she had shared with James, but it felt more like home than that place ever had. No more wondering if she had really left her keys in the refrigerator. No more finding her clothes rearranged in her closet. No more questioning her own memories and sanity. The screen door creaked open, and Patricia stepped out, bringing another blanket. "It's getting chilly," she said, draping it over Nora's legs. "Lily's almost ready for her video call." Nora nodded, checking her watch. These supervised video calls were part of the court's final ruling. James had been permitted limited contact with Lily, but only through approved channels and with a court-appointed supervisor present on his end. The criminal case against James was still moving through the system. After that day in family court, evidence had piled up quickly once people knew where to look. James's friend Pete had come forward, admitting he had suspected something was wrong, but had been too cowardly to speak up. The family doctor confessed that James had approached him with concerns about Nora, painting a false picture that the doctor had unfortunately believed. Even Tanya, Nora's former best friend, had tearfully apologized after realizing how thoroughly she had been manipulated. The pharmacy records had confirmed that James had indeed been filling prescriptions for sleep medication he had no legitimate need for. The forensic analysis of Nora's travel mug had been just the beginning. When authorities searched James's house, they found more crushed pills and a journal where he had meticulously tracked his dosing schedule for Nora. James had claimed it was all a misunderstanding, that he was just trying to help his unstable wife relax. But the videos Lily had recorded told a different story. In the end, he had accepted a plea deal rather than face trial, agreeing to attend mandatory counseling, perform community service, and most importantly, relinquish primary custody of Lily. "Mom, the tablet's ready," Lily called from inside the house. Nora set her tea aside and went in. Lily was sitting at the kitchen table, her tablet propped up on a stand. At 7 years old, she seemed older somehow, more mature than other kids her age. The counselor said that was normal for children who had lived through trauma and deception. Sometimes Nora felt guilty about that Lily had been forced to grow up too quickly, but the counselor reminded her that none of it was her fault. "Remember, 20 minutes, Nora said gently as Lily positioned herself in front of the screen. Lily nodded seriously. "I know, Mom." Nora stepped back, staying in the room but giving Lily enough space for privacy. On the screen, James appeared, sitting in what looked like an office of some kind. Beside him was Mrs. Bryant, the court-appointed supervisor. "Hi, Daddy," Lily said, her voice carefully neutral. "Hey, Princess," James replied with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "How was school this week?" As Lily began to tell him about her science project on butterflies, Nora watched her daughter's body language. The therapist had taught her to look for signs of stress or discomfort, but Lily seemed relatively relaxed today. These calls had been awkward at first, with James trying to subtly question Lily about Nora or making comments that undermined her mother. But Mrs. Bryant was good at her job, quickly redirecting him whenever he stepped over the line. Over time, the calls had become more normal. Just a father asking about his daughter's week, her friends, her interests. James seemed to be trying, in his way. The court-mandated therapy might actually be helping him understand the harm he had caused. Nora stepped into the living room to give Lily more privacy, finding Patricia arranging fresh flowers in a vase. "She seems okay today," Nora observed quietly. Patricia nodded. "She's resilient, kids often are." She paused, studying her daughter's face. "And how are you doing? Your support group meeting is tonight, right?" Nora smiled. "Yes. Actually, they've asked me to help lead a session next month." The support group for survivors of emotional and psychological abuse had been a lifeline during the darkest days. Now Nora was beginning to give back, sharing her story to help others recognize the warning signs she had missed. "I'm proud of you," Patricia said simply. Outside, the doorbell rang. Nora went to answer it, finding Tanya standing on the porch, holding a casserole dish. "Lasagna," she said with a hesitant smile. "Your favorite. At least it used to be." Their friendship was slowly mending. It had taken time for Nora to forgive, but eventually she understood that Tanya had been manipulated too, just in a different way. "Come in," Nora said, holding the door open. "Lily's on her call with James, but she'll be done soon. She'll be happy to see you." As they moved to the kitchen, Nora glanced at the refrigerator door where Lily's latest artwork was proudly displayed. It was a family portrait, Nora, Lily, and Patricia standing together in front of their new house. Across the top, in careful 7-year-old handwriting, were the words, "My safe home." That evening, after Lily had gone to bed, Nora sat at her computer, putting the finishing touches on an article she had written for an online magazine. Gaslighting: How to Recognize the Warning Signs was the title. Writing had become therapeutic for her, a way to process her experiences and perhaps help others who might be trapped in similar situations. Her phone buzzed with a text from David, her former attorney who had become a friend. "Just heard from the DA. James's sentencing is set for next Thursday. You don't have to be there if you don't want to." Nora considered this. Part of her wanted to see the final chapter of this legal process, to witness James facing consequences for his actions. But another part of her wanted to focus on moving forward, not looking back. "I'll think about it," she texted back. "Let me know what the doctor recommends for Lily." Lily's therapist had been helping them navigate each step of this journey, ensuring that Lily's needs remained at the center of every decision. So far, the doctor believed Lily was processing her experiences in a healthy way, but events like James's sentencing could bring up complicated feelings. Nora saved her article and closed her laptop. Outside, the night was clear and cool, stars visible above the trees. She stepped onto the porch again, breathing in the autumn air. A year ago, she had been living in constant fear and self-doubt, believing she might be losing her mind. Now she stood firmly in her truth, rebuilding her life piece by piece. The hardest part had been forgiving herself, for not seeing the signs sooner, for not protecting Lily better, for doubting her own reality. But as her therapist often reminded, her hindsight was always clearer than the fog of psychological manipulation. In the small garden she had planted in the spring, the chrysanthemums were blooming in vibrant purples and golds. Next year she planned to add more varieties, perhaps start a vegetable patch with Lily. They were putting down roots here, both literally and figuratively. Nora thought about all the women and men in her support group, many still in the early stages of recognizing their situations, gathering the courage to leave. She thought about the comments on her online articles from people who recognized their own experiences in her words. "You helped me understand what was happening to me," one had written just yesterday. "I'm making plans to leave next month." The road ahead wouldn't always be easy. Lily would have questions as she grew older, attempting to understand her father's actions. There would be court dates, therapy sessions, difficult conversations. But for the first time in years, Nora faced the future without fear. Her daughter had shown her what courage looked like, a small girl hiding a tablet among her toys determined to reveal the truth. If Lily could be that brave at 6, Nora could certainly find the strength to keep moving forward. As she turned to go back inside, Nora noticed a light still on in Lily's bedroom. She climbed the stairs quietly and peeked in, finding her daughter awake, writing in the journal her therapist had suggested she keep. "Everything okay, sweetie?" Nora asked softly. Lily looked up with a small smile. "Just writing about today. Dr. Winter said it helps to write things down so you don't forget." "That's good advice," Nora said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Mom?" Lily set her journal aside. "Are we going to be okay?" Nora brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's forehead. "Yes," she said with certainty. "We already are."